So now we come to another interesting part in Elisha's life. And just let's recap. Elisha is a farmer. And one day, Elijah comes and his whole life changes. From one moment he's a farmer and now he's going to be a prophet. A man of God, full-time, living the life that God has for him. He's just a normal guy, but he was able to do many miracles and help many people along the way. For example, he would take off his mantle, his coat, put it in the river, and the river would immediately make a pathway straight through. Can you do that? Of course not. But with God, nothing is impossible. And these men of God, God was able to use them to do these miracles. For example, he went one day to Jericho, and the people cried out, "The water's salty, we can't drink it." So he asked for a big jar of salt. He pours it in and says, "Drink." It's fresh water again. And it was. That was a miracle. God used impossible things to make things possible. That's how God works. Then, remember, the children were mocking him. We're saying Elijah went to heaven, and all these 42 children were chased by the big she-bears and destroyed and killed and tore to pieces for mocking. And the lesson was simple: never ever mock, especially a man of God. Then the woman came with her 2 sons, and her 2 sons were going to be taken away and sold as slaves because she had no money to pay the people she owed money. So he said, "Go and get pots," and he filled them with oil, and they went and sold them and got enough money to pay off her debt. This is the sort of thing, practical things God used through Elisha to speak to the people. And I love this part, whenever the enemy was so angry, and every man of God has enemies, and today it's no different. People will hate you for living for God. And Elisha was so used to God that the enemy hated him, because God would tell him who was planning to attack Israel, and when they were doing it, he would tell the king, and the king would get his army ready. And the enemy then focused only on Elisha to capture him, to destroy him, so they could capture Israel. And then whenever they come out, for example, they came to attack him, and Elisha never even panicked. You know why? Because God sent an invisible army of horses and angels above his home so that the enemy could not attack. And that's wonderful how God was actually able to do that. But then after this here, Elisha come across, and the students were busy working, building a bigger college, and they were hungry. So they decided, we need to get some food, so they're taking turns. And one of them was cooking, and he went into the forest and he got herbs and all sorts of plants and for the soup or the stew it was. And he didn't realize it, but he put poison into it by mistake. And he kept mixing it, put the meat into it, added the water, and all the things you do to make the stew, and he began to mix it. Then he poured it out into the dishes, and as the people began to eat, suddenly they started, "Death! There's death in the pot!" In other words, there was poison in the pot, and they were all going to die. And they quickly called for Elisha and said, "Elisha, we're going to die. There's poison in the big pot. What are we going to do?" And he asked for meal. And he said, "Put the meal in the pot and keep mixing it." He said, "Pour it out again." And he says, "If you don't eat that, you're going to die. You must keep eating the pot now." And the people couldn't realize it. "Keep eating, we're going to die." He said, "You're going to die because you've eaten it. And the only way you're going to stop dying is by eating what I've told you to eat." It's not unusual, but that's the way the Lord works. He works in an unusual manner that we would never think of. God doesn't work the way we work. God works the way He works. And as a result, these people realized Elisha was a man of God, and God preserved every one of their lives because of what Elisha done by doing that to the stew. That was a miracle. Every one of them should have died, but they lived because of what Elisha done to the stew.